Hello, everybody. Welcome to a special Hamster's Hobby Hang on a Friday. We got some cities untold. Thank you for your patience. I was scrambling through the door here. But that brings us to our first pro tip. You ready? Close your paint bottles, especially when traveling. We had a rogue deep sea water green on the train. Luckily, I put it in a bag. But we have some special green accents here. Let's get some tunes going. Oh, we're on the finale song of this album. My favorite, but the most, I guess, melancholy. Yeah, that is why I always put it in a bag and, into a duffel or something. And nothing has happened yet until today, so thank goodness I made it a habit. At least it's on unpainted, yeah. Arby's? No, don't tell anyone. McDonald's tonight, because I was running from the stop, and I have the app, so I had it ordered before I got there. It's been a whole ride. But we're here to paint, thank goodness. Always chicky nugs, every time in my boat. There is only one Arby's that I know of in New York City, and it's by Penn Station, which I rarely go to, especially since living in Brooklyn. And if I have some reason to be in that area, whatever it is, my first thought is I could stop at the Arby's. Oh, man. Can't be true. At least one where like I can get to it by train. I'm not sure if you were referring to Arby's with that comment, but McDonald's nugs are mid. I would argue almost every bit of food that they serve is mid, but when you want it, you want it, and in this case, I needed it fast. We do have the meat sweats. I certainly do. I am sweating. I'd like to think it's because I was running from the subway, but it's probably at least in part due to the chicky nuggies. They do serve a pretty good soda. I learned recently because everyone's heard the rumors, right, that like the Coca-Cola is better there, and it's because of like the temperature and whatnot. But I heard recently they also when they buy it, it is supplied to them in like stainless steel containers instead of the bags of like the syrup. And I think it's because, when they first started, it was like they did that anyway. But then they stopped doing that and started doing the bags. But McDonald's was like, no, stainless steel. So that affects it too. That's the thing. Of course it's mid, but for $1, hello? Can't argue with that. It came in plastic bags when I worked there 15 years ago. Been debunked. It's been debunked then. Hand me with the inside intel, which is apparently not true. At least not in all cases. Ooh, Letitia's making cinnamon rolls. Awesome. Nerd Town. The capital of Dorksville. Mayor Hamster. I do like the fries. King Nerd has arrived. Yes, the lord of all nerds. Augustus. / Chris. I want to go to Letitia's too if there's cinnamon rolls. There's both Letitia present and cinnamon rolls present. That's a double win. Plus a cat? It's the best of both worlds. Clowny's uncool Nerd Town. Real. All right. Well, I have a couple things here. Here's another victim of New York City subway. And entirely my fault. One of the paint bottles, for those who are just joining, was open in my bag. Thankfully, it was in an additional plastic bag, but all my paint bottles. It could have been worse, honestly. There's no like pooling. It's just like, just shaken out here and there and like coated the bag just a little bit, so everything that was in there. But well, we have to prime this stuff anyway, so I'm gonna do that quick while we're chatting. That's all right. It was just one of those like movie New York City commutes, just like ducking and weaving and sweating. Sell this online, yeah. Here, custom painted. How's that? Pro painted Dwarven Forge. I want to do these roofs first because we had a request on the Discord. So I want to make sure these have a decent prime. You'll see here, this is fine on the slates. You don't quite need this opacity, so I might skip that. But on the wood, it's a little different back here. Just going to cover up some of these gray spots on the resin prototypes here on the wood parts. And then get a coat on some of this other stuff too. We are on Ham Planet, baby. That's right. Population 1 hamster, or I guess 69 plus 1 hamster, based on the stream count. But yeah, I'm excited to paint some roofs. I like the schemes, and they're honestly fairly quick to batch. Ham Planet is a chill planet. Is the ham jammer in the room with you? Yeah. These ones are Siocast, yes. We got a bunch of these in Siocast. A handful of the accessories, including these bad boys. But forgive me, what's going to be a little more cumbersome is painting this kitchen prime. But we'll get through it, and then it can sit tight and dry. There's just a lot of like these deeper crevices that are tough to get. But we have a number of things to do, so we'll see if we even get to this, because I want to show you the 2 roof schemes, and then there was one alt scheme that someone requested. So we'll try that out. I'm just glad that we had blank roof casts that I could use, because we've had to use them all for builds. So I was surprised we even had exactly these 2 extras. All that's left. The rest are all painted and being shot, photographed beautifully, video. This is my first time painting Siocast, but I think it's always safe to prime stuff. Any acrylic primer will do. Your spray can. I'm using just Vallejo acrylic primer. The trick with these prototypes is it's the white resin, so if you miss a little spot, it's like a headlight. So that's a challenge at the old studio. But there's a little bit of paint stabbing going on in the recesses, you know? But we'll get it on here just enough to be able to show you the paint and yeah, I like this primer a lot too. I use it with brush and airbrush. It does in the airbrush kind of dry as like that film in the cup, which, you know, you gotta be careful about cleaning up. But that's why I like it as a primer, because it like suctions to the pieces, you know? Yeah, I've done some white or light gray base coats as well. I think it depends on like how I want to paint it. If I'm gonna layer up, oftentimes I'll prime black, because you can just like start dark and go lighter and lighter and get opacity that way. If I'm gonna do transparency effects like contrast paint and that kind of thing, I'll start lighter because I haven't been using them a lot lately. Well, very recently I started using them again, like my Army Painter speed paints and my golden transparents. And because I was previously mostly doing the layering from dark from a black base, I was leaving a lot of like black areas so you can cover them up with layers, right? But with the contrast paint, you gotta add a lot more gray. Like I gotta prime it differently and add a lot more gray to the midtone. Because normally I'm doing kind of some kind of zenithal or like black and white sketch kind of prime. And I gotta add a lot more gray than when I layer it up. Because the color filter from the contrast paint or whatever you're using will just kind of die in the black areas. All right. We'll let that dry. Yeah, I'm at home tonight. The old Hobby Hank setup. What was that notification? Something disconnected. Uh-oh. Am I still online? Letitia, in my time at Dwarven Forge, 5 years almost now, I've gotten completely unpainted. And I paint so much Dwarven Forge at Dwarven Forge. I haven't painted any of my own Dwarven Forge. So I'm still deciding if I'm going to get painted or unpainted. Because I plan to paint all of it, obviously. So I get it. But I think what happens every time is going to happen again. Where I get to Pledge Manager and I'm like, I can get so much more if it's unpainted. And I'll probably succumb. And then the boxes will come and I'll be like, oh boy, I have a big project ahead of me. He needs to paint his wildlands first? Yeah, exactly. I got stuff all the way back from Caverns Deep, baby. You know, this set is definitely good for unpainted, I'd say, because so much of it is the wood. It's just two dry brushes, and even the roofs you'll see are pretty simple to do. I think this is a great way to go. Like we always have resources for like wildlands and that kind of thing, but I understand that like there's a lot of detail in wildlands and it's maybe a little more intimidating to paint, but this one, the paint is fairly simple. It's just like, you know, your posts, your walls, your floors, and then you build it together and make the magic. But the paint is pretty simple to execute. I got two unpainted sets for Wildlands and got them and was like, what have I done? See, that's the thing. I don't even want to open the boxes. I don't even want to see how many pieces there are. Like, if I do it, I'm gonna just like batch all of it. I'm just because if there's one thing that I've learned at Dwarven Forge, it's like how to just batch a large amount of pieces. And like back in the day, I would not have the patience for it, but I've kind of just like got it in my brain of like, all right, we're clocking into batch painting town now. Binge a show 3 seasons at a time in the background. There was one time where I was going to my best friend's house, flying there to play Warhammer 40K. This was in like 2020 or something. And I really, because we like hadn't played in years, I really wanted it to be fully painted, and he also had his army fully painted. And so I just strapped in, I said, screw it. The night before my flight, I painted for 18 hours straight a full Eldar army, and I watched all of the Queen's Gambit in a row. And that's what got me through it. And then I didn't sleep. I just walked to, went to the airport, got up from my desk, packed it up, went to the airport. Oh man, I wouldn't suggest painting like that. I was very tired. But it's rewarding at the end when you see it all, but in the moment it's like, oh god. Oh man. All right. There's still somewhat primer on the wood, but we'll start with a slate here. Um, so I don't know, you might not be able to tell from the photos, but the base on the dark roofs is actually like a purpley color. Whenever I do something dark and kind of like weathered and desaturated, I like to add a little color personality to it. I think my camera's frozen. Or I've become a vampire and I don't have a reflection because my hand is in front of the camera right now. I'm just realizing, okay, so this isn't too unlike Hobby Hang where you're just looking at me chatting and nothing happening on my desk, but that's probably what's been happening for the last how long of me priming this stuff and it's not happening. Okay, bear with me 1 second. Um, this may be the mysterious disconnect. Has that been happening on Twitch and stuff? Okay. It's me, Doom. Okay, I'm just gonna go over here so you don't see like all the wonky camera stuff happening. Because I'm gonna be flipping it around and stuff. Um. Okay. Okay, we have camera. Repeat, we have camera. We're flipping it right side up. Hey, I'm back. And I'm not a vampire. Whew. All right. Oh, yes, there was a mysterious disconnect. And I was like, what was that? It was the dang camera, the most important part. What on earth? Okay. Well, I'm glad that the conversation was just so interesting that you stuck with me while there was nothing happening on there. But so I was saying for the dark rooms, the slate color is actually kind of a purpley color. Because I like to add like some kind of color identity when I'm doing something like dark, and I think it's a good opportunity to do that because it's still gonna be subtle. And like you can see from the photos, it still looks like really dark and rustic. And especially when you're doing it on a dark base, even like Dungeon Gray is going to be fairly dark base. Um, so I just base coat this whole darn thing this way, and actually especially in the recesses here, because most of this is going to get covered up. But here, what I'll do is we'll try to mix this a little bit. Because what's been really helpful this Kickstarter is if we're doing any mixing that's not straight out of the bottle of Picorni paint, we got some empty paint bottles that will just, because a lot of times if I'm doing a lot of prototypes, you know, I'll mix it up and like get through that step and have to just remix it. So this time I would just spend like 20 minutes and mix in a cup like a bunch of batches of the paint and put it in a bottle. And you can get those bottles fairly cheap, these little guys. Just even on like Amazon or something. Assume we were just watching paint dry. Yeah, that wouldn't be the first time on the old Hamster stream. Just talking about Arby's. All right. Arby's with no cheddar sauce? What is wrong with people? Ah, yes, it is I, Matt Varnish. All right, so over on the right, looks like it's a little out of camera. I just have black and white because we're going to desaturate the purple a little bit. So we still want it to be subtle. And I'll probably just use my pre-mix for the most part, but we'll try to match it here. So obviously, we're going to add some red and some blue. I'd be careful adding the blue to really any other color because it's super intense, so even a small amount is going to affect the mixture a lot. I would say the purple here leans a little more red, kind of like this. But we're going to desaturate the heck out of it anyway. So again, be careful when you add black. So it only takes a small amount to make a big impact on the mixture. And what's interesting is you have to go brighter than you think because you're painting on a dark base, and acrylics, pretty much no matter what, are always somewhat transparent. Obviously not this bright, but we're going to darken it down with the black. But maybe slightly too much as it is. And I've overfilled my wet palette, so now we have a purple soup. But that's alright. So now we've desaturated it. Probably lightened it too much, despite what I said. So if we keep adding black, it's just going to go grayer and grayer. So I'm going to go back to blue. Back to the blue and red. Just kind of bring it back to that dark. But still keep the color in there. You do end up adding a fair amount of black, I would just suggest. You know, being conservative with how you mix. Do it in steps, just like layering up on a miniature, right? So look on the palette, it looks fairly dark, but when you're in like a transparent layer, it's still really super duper bright, right? And this is our pre-mix, what we're going for. Going back to black. Getting a little closer. But see, look how much, I just added a little tiny bit of black from there to there, right? Big difference. But see, matching colors especially takes a lot of time, so this is why I try to pre-mix it in one go to fill up a bottle. Yeah, so that's closer. So you can see how dark it is. It almost looks black down here, right? And even the premix. But there's a little subtle color identity there still. And I did that too because I knew I'd be dry brushing over it and covering it a lot of it up. So I had some room to add a touch of color in there. Because the main effects will be like the texture showing up with the dry brush and that kind of thing. And because of that dry brush, I'm really making sure it's getting into these recesses, because if you leave these dark, then it will just, what will be remaining is just the dark areas, either the casting color or the black primer in this case. So it'll still influence the dry brush, so I want it all over, but I especially want it in those cracks. My kids might get unpainted pieces in my will. Yeah, I hear that. Speak about airbrushing. I honestly haven't airbrushed Dwarvenite, but I've airbrushed primed all these resin prototypes. And based on the Dwarvenite I have painted, I don't think it'd really be an issue. Just with your regular acrylics and whatnot. With anything new, the best advice I can give is do it on a test piece. Do it on a floor that you can always just repaint, or, you know, put a primer over it, or Dungeon Gray paint we have available now, so you can just repaint it. But test stuff out. see how it reacts. Um, and normally you don't have to prime Dwarvenite to be safe with like such a fine technique, like where the paint is really fine, like airbrushing. Might do you well to prime it just to make it super adhesive with the paint. Paint does stick to the Dwarvenite really, really well. Like even our prototypes, don't finish them, don't varnish them. Um, and the factory paint is enamel. It's like really durable, but it adheres. Our acrylics adhere to the Dwarvenite really well, but it would never hurt. So people, as far as I know, don't often have to seal it, but you know, it's always going to help durability. So again, whatever primer you're using, a spray can or an airbrush, just do a test first on a little section of a finished piece, see how it reacts, see how it changes the color. This is true on pretty much anything too, because the varnish can kind of alter the color a little bit, or at least like how it's perceived. So just do a little test, but that should be no problem. Are you guys planning to have hue value variations in the factory painted wood? Um, just like batch painting prototypes, same when you're producing, manufacturing in a factory at mass scale, there's always a little bit of variance. So there'll probably be a master that is one scheme and it'll be based on that. But there's going to be like a spectrum, right? Of like a little give one way or the other across them. Sorry, I got a little bit of paint on my wall. What do you think will be the official paint guide for the sculpted cobblestone tiles? Want to get them unpainted to save a bit, but I'm worried about them matching the battle boards. Um, the guide, I'm sure there will be either a video or a PDF or both. That is an Erin's scheme, so I have to learn that from her. Um, but kind of just what I was talking about, there's probably going to be very slight variation from like the battle board art and the tiles, the sculpted tiles that are painted. So even if there is a little variation on your paint when you're matching, it's probably going to look just fine if you follow the guide that I'm sure we will produce. Um, but I wouldn't be too concerned. All the schemes are designed to be fairly simple to execute, and of course, the cobblestone is based on the cobblestone battleboard art is based on the cobblestone paint. So if you just follow that, we'll give you a nice resource to be able to execute that with confidence. Vertex is it's not on purpose. It's mostly, you know, the prototypes are interesting because we're doing them in a variety of ways. Like some are 3D printed. We've tried different types of resin. So sometimes like the finish on them is a little bit different, or maybe there's like one prototype has a little loss of texture versus another. So even when you're just dry brushing them, it looks a little different, even with the same colors, right? So those quirks you're noticing can kind of be from those factors too. What will be the most challenging piece to paint? Um, Honestly, it might be this kitchen. Not because it's hard, but because there's so many doodads. But that's what makes it so cool, right? There's so many like cool little items. So not necessarily the hardest. One of the longest to paint of the accessories, I'd say, but it's not difficult. Similarly with maybe the bookcase, because there's like all the different books, right? So many doodads. Dude dads. Modular produce. That barricade kind of similarly, but all these things too, like they pull from different parts of the all the paint schemes. Like, you know, there's wood on the barricade, right? Some of them are just following the same scheme, but it's just like smaller details and that kind of thing. So the effects of the paint, there's no like special effects or anything that are super difficult on their own. It's just a matter of like the small details. The hardest piece to paint is the 300th. Yeah, that's fair. Oh, right, the textured battle boards. Yeah, so those will probably match even more because there's like the three-dimensional texture. Um, so sometimes it's like, you know, you can obviously just see the visible difference between like 2D terrain tray, for instance, versus the sculpted, and they match really well, but you can like just see the physical dimension difference. But that will be less so the case on those. Are the docks intentionally different from the wood? Like the base city building wood? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely different. Kind of like it's at the sea, it's getting like bashed by water and that kind of thing. Okay, how's this doing? I'm gonna mute real quick and hair dry this purple paint. Now the factory painted pieces aren't sealed with anything. It's a really durable enamel type paint. And so this step is already easy. The rest is just as easy here. I'm gonna dry off this brush. I've heard people say once you get a brush you want to use for dry brushing wet, you have to like wait a day for it to dry out. Just give it a squeeze, just like when you dry your hair, you like kind of squeeze it out. And I don't pull. I don't like pull as I'm squeezing because you don't want to yank any bristles out or anything or loosen up the ferrule, but just to give it a little squeeze here and there, and then it's usually fine for dry brushing. I never realized how many paper towels I would go through painting. Yeah, I hear that. Honestly, I use them for too long though. It's just like seeping into the desk under the towel. Okay. But you only need one for the dark roof. You only need one additional color. And that's olive dry brush. 3D print, you can look for similar colors from gold and high flow acrylics. They're very similar in formulation. the best place to get your first wet palette is from the grocery store or the pharmacy or something. Just get a Tupperware, like a sandwich Tupperware that's shallow, and fold up paper towel as the sponge, and then buy baking paper, parchment paper. It's like wax paper without the wax, very important, without that layer. And cut that out as a palette paper. I use that for years. This thing is literally just a plastic tray that's shallow. And this sponge is, I think they're called like Swedish dish towels or something. You can get a bunch of them and use half of them as sponges and half as dish sponges. And then this is just baking paper. I literally get this at the dollar store. Stay Wet palette, almost the same price as Tupperware. I also got my Tupperware from the dollar store. But yeah, honestly, the Stay Wet palette, super nice. Quality, also really cheap if you find it on Amazon especially. So you can always check that out too. But some of this you might already have too, so you might be able to make a wet palette right now, you know? But so here we're just doing a general overall dry brush. Now this brush is still a little damp, but I do want to make sure that most of it is off. This isn't super heavy. I'm going to keep it fairly light because I want to leave some of that purple. And this is almost like a mid-tone, and we're going to go more opaque with this color at the end. So this is just kind of a dusting. And then we'll sort of highlight with the same color, but just like making it more opaque. Look at that, bam, just nice big flat brush. Got the whole thing, just like that. It's a little satin, so it's hard to see, but there you go. So I'm gonna switch to a smaller brush, just for a little more control. And just take the same color. And a lot of times if I'm batch painting, you can do just dry brushing again for this step, where you're just making a heavier area of the olive. But especially if I'm doing a lot of them, I got to do them fast. I just keep it fairly wet. And I definitely still wipe off the excess, but not like a dry brush. And I'm focusing on like the lower parts of the each shingle. So that's too much. Here I'm just kind of doing like a circular motion because I don't want to like cover up everything. I want it to hit like the texture too, but that's kind of what you're going for. And especially if I am starting to go extra heavy, I might go back and redo the middle step up here and just hit this a little bit more to blend it, right? But that's the basic idea. I'm just kind of thinking of the downward motion like toward the bottom of the shingle. Like that. So again, if you want to be a little more careful, you can do this with dry brushing. It just might take a little bit longer. I'm just basically doing like light pressure, like almost a dry brush technique of like sweeping over the texture with a feather dust kind of pressure, but just with slightly more paint on the brush. Yeah, this is olive dry brush. So the base coat is a really dark purple mix. It's just Regal Red, Basalt Blue, black and white. Or if you can even do Caverns or Stone Edge in black or something. Any paint that can, you know, desaturate it, gray and black even. Because it's not going to be super bright. and then the olive dry brush, and that's it. So you can see there's a little bit of variation like between the opacity, so you can either keep that, because I think it's fairly natural, or you can just go back to different areas and shore it up. Maybe you started running out of paint on the brush a little bit, so it got a little weaker. Just say your moves are weak and you do another layer. Yeah, it's definitely going to be close. It's definitely going to be close, because we make it out of percorny, right? So it's going to be our blue and our red, and you might just punch it up or down with black and white. I would love to get a purple in the mix, actually. Painting over it? No, there's a lot of people that touch up the factory painted pieces. If you're going to a fully different scheme over the caverns, I might still just like, for convenience sake, spray it or base coat it, with a heavy color. Unless you're just going to slightly adjust it from the cavern scheme. What you know what that might be is the factory paints kind of finish a little satin, which is slightly like liquid resistant. So it might be easier to do that if you like spray them with a matte varnish and make the surface matte, and the paint will stick better if you're running into that. But yeah, Hellscape is kind of like a weird scheme because it's all transparent pieces. But yeah, that's the dark roofs, and then it's just silver darkened down with a little black on the top. Yeah, Hellscape is tough. Just transparent pieces in general are a little bit more difficult to paint. Just because exactly what you're talking about, the adhesion of the paint and whatnot. Again, mostly wet paint, light pressure, like a dry brush, but not fully like rubbed off. It's a dark silver. Oh yeah, the top ridge is metal. And let's see. Let's get the Saboteur color from my bag. Deep water green. And similarly, this roof just starts with a base coat. Getting it in that recess. Because that is what is going to stay behind. Mace? What scheme of the roof is this new, though? This is how the green roof starts. It just gets slightly bluer. Yeah, I like the Wizard Towers a lot. But while that base coat is drying, might as well hit the wood on this old one. The scheme is green, yeah. Exactly. So the primary wood is the same colors as the wood on the Tudor from City Builder and the wood in Wildlands, like the stumps and stuff. Based wood, yeah. Starting with base wood. Now these prototypes are a little tough because there's a little bit of loss in the texture, but yours will be easier to dry brush on here. So I've noticed it may go a little streaky on this first coat, which is fine because normally with the highlight, it kind of evens it out. But you shouldn't run into that too much from the factory pieces. Just angle the brush to make sure you're not hitting the finished slate here. Frequently I would actually start with the wood because I would rather like get any slate color down here that's often covered than like get wood oddly on the edges here. Maybe your preference will be different, but I normally kind of start with this step. Welcome back, Chris. Sometimes on the prototypes, I don't even mind if it's a little streaky because where the texture is lacking, I just use some brush strokes that look like wood grain. But yeah, so this is already pretty easy. This is a pretty good prototype. So the factory versions will be even simpler, nicer texture to catch your brush. Probably do one more go. The same thing real quick. But yeah, if you have a, just a good sized brush, you can whip through these pretty quickly. I was hoping to have time to do one alt scheme. Someone suggested the like Stormwind Stormwind World of Warcraft roofs, like the blue ones. I was gonna try that out maybe. And if you've seen any of the Forest Wildlands videos or City Builder Tutor, you know this next step is just throw a little bit of stucco. Well, I ruined the bottle, but a little bit of stucco into the base wood for the highlight. Pretty much done the same way, just a little lighter. And that's it. Gotta accept when a towel is done for. So I'd say on the first dry brush, you can definitely afford to be sloppier because you're covering it up with this step. But that means be a little more careful. Make sure most of the paint is off. And I'd like to give it a little bit of a squeeze in the paper towel. Just to make sure there's not like a hidden clump of paint in there, you know? But as you get used to it, you can maybe leave a little more paint, get used to the brush pressure. So I'm kind of, there's slightly more wet paint in here now. And it's starting to come off a little bit better. I am. Spent thousands on Dwarven Forge just like spending a nickel on a new paper towel. Yeah, I hear you. I'm just like, I don't want to spend the time doing it. It's like, I'm busy painting though. And then like the towel is so drenched in paint that it starts working against me. And I'm like, what is happening? It's like, Hamster, you made the choice not to get a new towel. It's on like its last legs. It's past its last legs. Why does your towel have legs? And then I'll go through that and finally get a new towel. If these are painted, they'll probably get used in the Kickstarter. We finally have most of the roofs we need for builds, but there's still a little bit of wet paint on there, so I'll do these wood sides quick. I just paint with my fingers. They're a little more expensive than brushes, though. Yeah, for dry brushing, I wouldn't buy super expensive brushes because it beats them up, but you really can't go back when you're like painting a miniature with like a natural hairbrush. It has an actual like needle sharp tip. It's hard to go back once you do that. But they do last a long time, especially if you take care of them. And by that I mean nothing hardcore, just like, get some soap in the bristles when you're done painting with it. There's a little bit of the catastrophe green from Transit on there, but I'm just gonna ignore it. So you can't get away with like fairly wet paint to get a more opaque layer quickly. It's just about the angle and the pressure. See how it got a little streakier in the middle? But as you get used to it, you can kind of feel it out, and you'll know if you have enough paint or too much, usually. As you're like grabbing it almost, you kind of feel the viscosity. Uh, you want to see the green paint of the tiles? What do you mean? You want a lighter green? Is that what you mean? Okay, okay. What's your favorite flavor of paint? Probably this blue. It's the only one I've gotten like fully in my mouth. This is adding white, so it is desaturating a little bit. Sludge is a great color. Yeah, I don't have it here. I don't have every Picorni paint at home here, but If you wanted a lighter green, that's a good one. The shallow water green is maybe more of a foresty green, a little lighter than deep water, probably darker than sludge, but like bolder. And sludge is like that perfect middle ground between starting to desaturate but still colorful. You like the middle green the best? Yeah, that's a nice one. Yeah, I use sludge a lot. I like to use it for like grime, like weathering, like moisture collecting, or like a mossy feel. It's a little, it ends up like maybe a little cartoony, but that's why I like it. It's like exaggerated, it pops. Yeah, the light green is nice. Near the top. Yeah. Oh, like randomly like scattered. I thought you meant you want to see like a paint. You mean you mean you don't like that style? Is that what you mean, like a speckling? Okay, okay, okay. It's been a long day. I'm sorry. All right, that's actually a cool idea. So I'll show you the second dry brush after this. So the original scheme is just a base coat of the deep water green, but now we'll get back to that. At least somewhat. It'll be a little lighter with this underneath. I'm with ya. I'm with ya. Hamster brain does not compute. It's actually kind of nice that this is wet because they'll vary. Each of them will vary a little bit. I might even just take white and just wet blend it on there. Probably be somewhat conservative with how many I do this bright, but we'll start there and then we can fill in the gaps. Accent shingles, yeah, exactly. Painting Fieldstone, glad to be here to hang and paint. I'm glad you're here too. That's actually in the factory scheme, and you can do it even more with a Fieldstone. I like how there's like accent stones throughout. So you could even go further with that and pick a couple different colors even and pick out as many as you like. And then do that. It'll all make it cohesive when you do that same dry brush over the top. Actually, that reminded me, Miles showed me a house that he used to live near that kind of had varied slate shingles like this. It looks really cool. Now, because there's going to be a dry brush over this, I got to make sure to not do some that are like too subtly different. I want to go a little more exaggerated in general, since some of it will get covered up. Like ones like this, I wonder if it will be enough, but maybe. The city's wood is just one dry brush of base wood, one dry brush of base wood and stucco mixed, probably with a little more stucco. Looks like a mermaid tail, yeah, like fish scales. On first of two coats on accent stones, only halfway through my pieces. All right, we'll keep on pushing. I know what it's like to batch paint a lot of pieces, so just put on some entertainment and keep on trucking. Rainbow fish roof, yeah. All right, I'm gonna blow dry this quick. Oh, and a real quick, on the inside parts here, we are adding a little bit of a dark wash just to have a little variation, like because if this is like sitting on top of a walls, it's not just like wood all the way up. There's a little variation right there. But you can see here, oh, this one we didn't do the second dry brush. But so like that's the difference between just the base wood coat plus the highlight. So to do the wash, just thin down a little bit of a dark brown or a black. And let it kind of collect. And in this case, you probably want it to like stain the whole area. It's more of a glaze. Just to get some of the, like, exaggerate the recess, because it is like physically recessed in there, right? So let's do a little bit of that in there. What are we talking about? Quick, while Hamster can't talk back, everyone trash talk Butterburgers. What the heck? Get out of here. Hold on, you're getting banned. No, I'm just kidding. Has Hamster been eating Butterburgers again? If only. If only there was a Culver's out this way. If only. What's Butterburgers? The best thing on the friggin' planet. You go to Culver's, you get a Butterburger and a custard shake. Oh my god. See, Mace is with me. She's from the Midwest. Butterburgers are top tier. Time for another intervention. Oh, you like smash burgers? I respect that. Okay, so Aaron's dry brush is a bit of a concoction of like golden cerulean blue and shallow water green, and it's like desaturated slightly maybe with like dungeon gray, I think. But what I have here is similar. I'm just gonna mix in a little bit of the bubbles blue, and we will make a resource for like the Exacxies mixture, because some of this is kind of pending because we have to verify it with the factory, right? But I have had to quickly paint like last minute a couple of roofs of hers, and it at least was close match when I did this. But it's similar in color, if not the exact recipe, and maybe slightly more desaturated. So I'm just throwing in a little of the deep water green into the bubbles blue. Same thing, gonna wipe a lot of it off and be fairly conservative. But this kind of transforms it. You've seen in the photos, right? Like from this, like, you know, really green into sort of a bluish green. I'm gonna throw in a little more of the deep water green, because it's similar in steps to the other one where there's like an overall dry brush and then even more of a highlight one. Obviously, this one's a little different because we did our varied rainbow fish tiles. So I just threw in a little extra bubbles blue. For Aaron's sake, I'm going to desaturate that a little bit. So I want to get close to what she does. See, it's already kind of transformed, right? It's like still in the green family, but it's like way bluer now. And again, I'm using bubbles blue. She has a full concoction. So this might be exaggerated slightly, but that's kind of in the vein. And I think that turned out well with the varied tiles. Ended up fairly subtle, but still impactful. And I think I gave this note to myself while we were doing it. Some of these started to vanish. The like in between middle green ones. So I'd probably stick to the brighter accents, because it does start to blend together with the dry brush. Yeah. Yeah, that's a cool idea. Thank you for suggesting that. It's a really neat idea. Let's squeeze in that Stormwind custom. All right. Let's give it a go. I'm going to go back to black. Oh, and while this is drying, I can show you the metal on the green roofs. We only have one little metal speck up here, but so this I just took from Aaron's big bottle. It says Golden brand copper. Um, which is super duper orange. So she knocks it back a little bit with like a dungeon gray and maybe a bronze, the Gorgon bronze. I do like the copper. It's just against the Lowtown. It's like super duper in your face. But in general, I do like that color copper. Now we're at about there. Right? So let's see. Just knock it down a little bit. Started there. Go from here to here. Well, yeah, now that we have the Bubbles Blue out, which I like to use for verdigris. I know it's often maybe a little more green than this blue, but for fantasy exaggeration's sake, I still tend to go more toward this color. So let's put some copper out there. Yeah, that like shallow water green combined with Bubbles Blue. Mwah. Golden and copper? Yeah, I was thinking that was a golden brand. Yeah, I'm glad it's making you more confident. The schemes really are especially simple in Cities Untold Lowtown. Like in execution, it's just a lot of dry brushing. All right, hair dry central, BRB. Decided that copper is the most common metal in our game world. I love that because it's just a beautiful scheme. Verdigris and copper. So I'm going to water this down a little bit. I'm going to cover this all up. The bay window roof I batch painted this way. Or pretty much covered the whole thing. Got a bunch on the wood, but that's right. And then I just like dab it off. Right? So now it's kind of collected in like the recess and some of the little divots. And then you can even go back and add little patches here and there. Just use my finger to kind of feather them out so it's not a splotch. Just dabbing it. All right. Instant. I like the variation that comes from me painting things. I think fantasy terrain's cooler looking when it isn't all the same and you have variation. I agree. I like that. Part of me is imagining like a Space Marine army for 40K. And obviously, like, they would all be from the same chapter, but like the galaxy is so vast. Like, what if there's groups of this chapter that are like planets apart and they don't find each other? And so, like, they know the history of the chapter and stuff, so they have like the color scheme going on, but it like has slightly differed because they both existed for like thousands of years apart. And so it has kind of shifted, or maybe their gear is like more weathered and like faded and the others isn't. So it's like the same colors, but like just very slightly different between them. And they like join forces or something, right? Yeah, 40K is awesome. I have so many miniatures to paint from 40K. Let's see. I am gonna pull up because someone put a request in the Discord for the Stormwind roofs, so I'm gonna look at the photo. Maybe. Okay, I'm doing a Google. Doing a Goog. Honestly, I think just out of the bottle, our blue here, this Picorni blue, is not a bad starting point. He's Googling! Look out! So especially because we're going over dark and some of this will vanish, I'm gonna just like start here. And also maybe it can be a little more like rustic because maybe it's the Lowtown version of Stormwind. That's also because this paint and a lot of blues in general are fairly transparent, so it might end up kind of dark. But you know what? That's how I come up with a lot of my backstories and paint schemes. Sometimes it's like, oh, what would this paint scheme look like based on the lore? But sometimes I'm like, I want to paint Cyberpunk Sisters of Battle. How would that happen in the lore? And I come up with a backstory. It might not be perfect, but just for opacity, I might throw in Bubbles blue into the blue. No, it's not quite right, but I need to get like some coverage and we can always glaze it down with the blue again, right? If I try to do it all the way from black, it's gonna take a while. Yeah, I'm super excited about the Cyberpunk Sisters. I got a bunch of Necromunda heads. So they have like mohawks and stuff. Well, they will when I build them. I only have like 6 Sisters of Battle, like the troops, Battle Sisters assembled. And I have like 2 battle forces of them. Yeah, sure, let's. Because we're already going to have some variation on here anyway, so maybe we'll leave some of the tiles like this. I got a hairdryer that will be sitting here forever waiting for this. I need to learn to paint minis someday. If you've been painting terrain, you could definitely paint minis. I'm convinced anyone can paint miniatures. It's just learning the tricks and learning the tools, and getting familiar with them. It's just practice, right? It's literally just time spent doing it. See, look how much better that shows up now. And we'll do the variation. I just want to get this nice blue down. Maybe we'll do the same thing then and just wet blend it. So we learned the really bright ones work the best. That's super duper bright. Maybe I'll tone it down a bit. The hardest part about this is like trying to randomize it on purpose. It's like avoiding patterns at all costs because all my brain wants to do is like make a pattern that's somewhat symmetrical. It's kind of interesting on the straight. There's like a couple kind of clumps of them. So maybe I'll leave the rest more spread out, but I kind of like how that looks relative to the rest of it, you know? Maybe we'll do turn this into a slightly smaller kind of adjacent thing here. Different shades help sell it. Yeah, that's what's kind of fun about this is they all differ slightly because I'm just doing it over wet paint. So what's kind of interesting about this, I guess it's not exactly the same Stormwind Blue, but I'm not sure I want to do the highlight as bright as these. So maybe these will get a different dry brush even. Maybe I can try to lean it toward that jewel tone. Let's see. Let's just try this. I just added Bubbles Blue to the Basil Blue. I'm kind of holding it upside down to let the shingles catch somewhat. I might even go heavier But you could stop here and that'd be cool. Gray dry brush. This is just Bubbles blue and Basil blue mixed. Let's see. So it's kind of like that. It is graying out a little bit because this is somewhat. There is like white and there's almost gray in the Bubbles blue, even though it's bright. But let's kind of a real-time time lapse. That makes it not a time lapse, but anyway, observe one light dry brush, and I'm just gonna keep going and see where we get. I'm also kind of getting it to hit more than like the dark roof where we left some of the base coat. I'm leaving less of the base coat maybe. I mean, I am in love with the shore line tiles with the seawalls in combination. Just the way the art makes it look like throw some scaffolding as docks on there. That's like one of my favorite parts of the builds I've seen. But I understand if you have river tiles, you could do something similar. I just like the sort of wake hitting the seawalls kind of effect that's on there. What did I miss? Just kind of doing a blue roof inspired by some of the Stormwind roofs in World of Warcraft that someone suggested. I'm starting to deviate maybe a little bit. Just doing some interesting stuff as we mix paint around. Hamster blued himself. Gosh. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I liked Amy's suggestion of varying the tiles again. Have you painted before? A little bit. I don't know, here and there. Yeah, I think I am gonna try a different dry brush on the lighter ones. See what happens there. This is pretty wet. So it might streak on me, but whatever. I'm basically just kind of sketchily freehanding this now. It's a little too wet on the palette. It's getting absorbing a lot of water on the wet palette, so. But we'll just try to get the effect. Quickly. Now it really looks like rainbow fish, huh? Thanks, Amy. If I did it again, I maybe would avoid more with this dry brush on the lighter ones because it's starting to. There's some weird little smudges and stuff. But honestly, on slate, weird stuff happens on there, so it's definitely not bad. If you made some of the tiles iridescent, it would look doubly myrrh. You're so right. The reflective glimmery fish scales. I don't have any interference paint on me, but that would be perfect here. After that Butterburger talk, all I was thinking about was food after that. The Blue Roof Inn. Yeah. It's kind of a cool combo if you had like that was the sound on my camera again. Maybe I'm kicking the cord. Um but anyway, that's what I wanted to show you anyway. Those two colors in combination are kind of neat together. All right. BRB. I think my little hamster feet are kicking the cord under my desk. Sorry about that. Incoming. All right. Hamster of the frozen fingers. Little hamster feet, yeah, they're just scurrying about under there. You know, I've really liked though, as much as I love my Tupperware for wet palette, this thing is a lot bigger than the one I had, and I couldn't go back. I love this amount of area. It's like perfect. What is this, like 10 inches or something? Now 8. Good, I'm glad. I love the roofs. I just love, the wood looks super ramshackle, desaturated, the canvas, and then the roofs just add that personality, especially the green roofs in combination with the dark ones. It just adds that pop like across a whole build. Especially like when you're looking down at the game table, right? It's built in front of you. Man, it's just a great like broad stroke accent to vary the which type of roofs your buildings have and have like the pop of color and then like the dark. Yeah, roofs are my favorite part. Yeah, they're freaking awesome. Plus, I mean, that the geometry too, beyond even the color. I mean, come on. Unfortunately, this was highly entertaining, so you must do it again. We were throwing around possibly doing another paint stream because that'd be fun before the Kickstarter's out. So we'll see. Oh, you're looking at Breath of the Wild art? That's sweet. Are you guys going to do unpainted 4 districts? I'm not sure about that. Yeah, hopefully we can get a group of people painting. We can do it in the production room or somewhere in the office. Yeah, the top limit on Kickstarter for pledging is a bit of a hurdle. Tears of the Kingdom. Ugh. Gah. Yeah, that's a fair point. If we offer a painted version of that, almost certainly it'll be an unpainted version. Looking forward to Tears of the Kingdom? Yeah. I didn't look at anything in Nintendo Direct except for that trailer. Custom barn paint scheme on the wood? That'd be cool. Like painted wood, the classic red and white crossbars. Mercer Calamity Cannon? Imagine. Yeah, paint along. I love when people do that on all the hobby hanks. Yeah, the fanciest stone is mostly going to like the cobblestone effect. That's kind of the new stone for like ground cover for now. But almost certainly when we go back to Hightown, there's going to be some cool florage. I could maybe convince myself to paint instead of harassing Hamster and playing Switch. No, I love it. Yeah, thank you for your suggestions. That was really cool. I love this varied slate effect. It's a really cool, simple way to get some variation. That really wouldn't add that much time to the paint scheme. Because you're kind of waiting for paint to dry anyway, so especially if you do it that way where you just like wet blend it when it's drying. Well, I'm glad. I'm glad you had fun. Dance, Hamster. No, honestly, in this room, I have the green screen here and an L desk, and basically my range of available motion is like the size of this chair, this square around me. Numa Numa? There we go. I can do that. Oh, man. Did you know in Breath of the Wild, the castle town before being destroyed had those vividly blue roofs? There you go. Now I have the Numa Numa song stuck in my head. Yeah, thank you for watching and sticking around. Well, hey, so keep an eye out for the stream schedule for the rest of the Kickstarter because we got some fun stuff planned. Hopefully, there'll be some more paint with even more Forge people from the studio. And yeah, this was a lot of fun. It's fun to go back and experiment and add new things to these because I've just like painted them in these schemes for months now. And I love seeing them in the builds, but it was nice to get a refreshing new reset on the roofs. So thank you all. Yeah, next stream should be Monday, right? Yeah, Monday at 1 p.m. Nate will be streaming Building with his kids. Oh, that'll be fun. That'll be good. Demo stream with added chaos. Yes, the chaos of children. Incredible. I can't wait. It will show the indestructibility of Dwarvenite. Nothing over the weekend? How do I live? I'm sorry. We'll be back ASAP. Oh, certainly chaos with Nate, too. Nate is playful chaos embodied. Oh, might add a building stream on Sunday. We'll see. Awesome. Yeah, so if you're not in the Discord, go ahead and join the Discord because there'll be announcements on there. I'm sure it'll be on social media as well if you follow those. Right now, we're going to start building right now in Hamster's bedroom. Awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much for watching this one. Thank you for your suggestions. Thank you for your